Morning, Darwin.
Good morning, Anita. I'm calling you from the Northeast where the second ice age has descended over our land. We are freezing up here and envying you people in Florida.
I'll teach you to live in New York.
I know. I miss Florida so much. But I want to really move into a really divisive issue that is going on in America. There is actually, as you I'm sure well know, an attack on baby boomers, both on the political front and the entertainment. And I would like to speak up for baby boomers, okay? Certainly on the political front, most of the attacks are being aimed at Hillary Clinton. And then Hollywood, the fight is centering around the people who nominate for Oscars in the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science. First on Hillary. The Republican strategists are very, very divided on whether to attack Hillary for being a baby boomer. Of course, she was born in 1947, and if she becomes president, she would be 70 years old. And some people think that it will offend women of a certain age if they attack Hillary on her age, because women of baby boomer women are among the chief voting bloc. And of course, as you well know, Reagan was that age when he became president. I've thought it amusing. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, called her a golden girl, rather mockingly. Well, she was born in 47, but he was born in 42. So, and now Rand Paul has decided he is a young man. I think he was born the year Kennedy was assassinated. He's decided to bring age in, like poor Hillary is really too old. She would not be able to make it through her first term, much less a
Let's see, I think I've lost Darwin. So we'll have to call him back. And while we're waiting, this will be a very exciting show because I usually don't get into politics, but we'll be listening to Darwin. And it is going to be a very interesting next year. I don't know what's going to come with it, but most importantly is I always feel that the United States, we should all pull together, against the rest of the people who are just doing things that are just horrible. So this isn't good for us to all fight among ourselves, even though we have different opinions. I think the best way for us to do this is to join the good people and have different opinions and discuss them, and let's get on with this wonderful country and life that we have. I certainly love the people who are on my radio shows. They're great. So, Darwin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I don't know. We lost you.
Ice Age I'm talking about.
I know. We lost you. But go ahead. You were talking about Hillary and her age, and you felt that was going to be a factor.
And as I said, I take this rather personally because I remember when I turned 62, this executive said, now, you control a great deal of our products, and this was when I worked for Simon & Schuster. And so I assume you'll be retiring very soon. And so we should really talk about who your replacements are going to be. Interestingly enough, this man was fired 18 months later, and I went on to do 30 more titles for Fromer and 30 books for Blood Moon Publishing since I was 62. So I don't rule out people who were born at a certain time,
Yeah, I agree with you so much. I hadn't heard that's they don't know where else to attack her, I guess.
Yeah, but on the entertainment front, now it's also the baby boomers who now occupy the Academy and nominate people for Oscars are coming now under heavy attack for failing to nominate Selma or having less diversity in the nominations this year. Now, this is the first time I have ever heard the Academy called too conservative, because usually they're attacked as too liberal.
Right.
In fact, Sarah Palin, in a very Churchillian phrase, just spoke to millions of people on TV and said, "Screw the liberals in Hollywood." A rather inelegant phrase, but mostly Hollywood has been accused of being too liberal.
Of course.
Yeah, but
wasn't it? Wasn't it also because Selma came in late? It wasn't really. Yeah, that's what happened.
There were many reasons about that. First, the diversity. There are many African Americans who are very, very opposed to Al Sharpton and others who are going to maybe lead. There is even talk of protesting Oscar night with all sorts of disruptions, maybe having a block up of those limousines or something. I think as other African Americans are thinking they should be concentrating on voting rights and other issues. Selma did get nominated for Best Picture, which is the highest award. And last year, the Academy nominated 12 Years a Slave. They are not bigots. In fact, there are more diversity in the entertainment industry than ever. Now, they keep pointing out the average age of an Academy member is 63, as if that were some horrible thing. Judges are often older generation. For example, they take surveys of everything today, and they took a survey of some of the younger Academy members, and they had never seen a picture with Betty Davis or Joan Crawford. A few had seen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which was not typical of the repertoire of those two fine ladies, and most of them had not seen Gone with the Wind. Whereas the baby boomers and the war babies, or even the people earlier, what do you call them, the Depression babies?
I don't know.
People born in the 30s.
I was born in the 30s. I'm not a Depression baby.
Well, whatever they were called. In other words, people who were born in the 1930s are also members of the Academy. And now they're being accused of great bigotry. But there's some problems here with that accusation. The entertainment industry is one of the industries in America that is very diversified today. I was an ad man in sort of that Mad Men era, and my bosses for 12 years, they hired only two African Americans, Lena Horne and Louis Armstrong. And today, anyone who watches, say, television for an hour, you will see great diversity. African Americans appear in almost any commercial today, and there's a greater emphasis on putting Asian people. So just because these people were born in a certain year, it doesn't make them bigots at all. I think there's another thing that happened why Selma or many other pictures got sort of pushed aside this year. They're good. There are years when they are just films not so good, and then there are years when there's an avalanche. And this year, or rather 2014, has been where many artists are performing at their peak capacity. The competition is unbelievable. The good news for us of a certain age is that Hollywood has turned out about 30 or 40 films that would be of interest to baby boomers. Just an amazing diversity of adult films like Still Alice with Julianne Moore. Jennifer Aniston has abandoned romantic comedies and done Cake about an older woman. She even appears without makeup. And so we have all of these competing things, and here is a man who was not a baby boomer, but a man, Clint Eastwood, at the age of 84, has directed American Sniper, which is another controversial film, but it's setting record-breaking box office. And I knew Clint Eastwood years ago, and I'm delighted that at the age of 84, he has turned out his masterpiece. Whether you agree with the political part of American Sniper is another point, but I'm judging it strictly as a movie. It's a brilliant directing job, and I like to see 84-year-old men at work. I just adore it.
Well, you speak so much truth, Darwin, and I do want to give you a really good news this morning. You're going to go on if you can take a deep breath, and I know you can. We're going to give you an extra half an hour because I just received Love Triangle, Ronald Reagan, Jane Wyman, and Nancy Davis, and I thought that after 5:30, we could talk about the book. Okay, so just know.
Yes, and I want to make some points because I've talked to people in the Academy. Thank you. That's fine. And there were many problems around Selma. The Academy, certainly the people of the Academy, over the years represented by such people as Elizabeth Taylor and Gregory Peck, no one ever accused them of being conservative. The members of the Academy are supposed to, and the whole purpose of the Academy was to select pictures and judge them on the basis of art, not political messages. Now, the film Selma originally had a script that apparently was more balanced, meaning the balance being between Lyndon Johnson and Martin Luther King Jr. And that's what happened in real life. I have 18 books here on Lyndon Johnson, and I also lived through that era. Jack Valenti, who was LBJ's chief assistant, said he started talking with Lyndon Johnson about advocating civil rights on the eve of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So it was always his priority. Now, the director got a script that was more balanced, but then she made, and I think she may have harmed her own case, she said, I don't want to direct a white savior movie. I want to, so she decided in the rewrite to make Lyndon Johnson a villain. Now, the poor man has the weight of Vietnam around his neck, but he was, many people thought that it would have been a stronger film if Ava DuVernay had placed Lyndon Johnson and Martin Luther King working hand in hand to bring civil rights. And as the New York Times pointed out, every white person in the movie who had a position of power comes off like an SS trooper, so we don't need to make Lyndon Johnson a devil too. So that caused a lot of controversy, and historians. So there's in the cultural pages of America, all this is being debated, and I think it's really a distraction. And I hope that the Academy Award presentations are not disrupted. I don't think that will help any cause to protest. You know, throughout the ages, a lot of losers have to come up. I mean, the greatest atrocity in the history of the Academy, Judy Garland didn't get the award for A Star is Born. It went to Grace Kelly for A Country Girl. Many actresses could have played that role. Judy Garland played I've talked to many stars, and they don't know what happened. So there's not necessarily on civil rights or any of those cases, but there's always people who get left out, and that's the awards are not always given necessarily to the right people. And a lot of people just didn't like Selma or didn't like the British actor who played Martin Luther King. He was surrounded by African Americans of immense talent. And some people in the Academy felt that these supporting actors more or less showed him up. And that's a view. That's a view about an art form. It was not considered a great role for him. Then some people thought it was the greatest role of all time. But to start fights on at this point on and blame people who are 63 years old and older, I think the entire record of the Academy should be looked at, and they've been very welcoming to people of all races, creeds, or whatever. But I'll tell you, going into this Academy Awards, I feel in many ways delighted because I felt older people had just been pushed aside for zombies and movies about hobbits and car chases and explosions. And for the first time, Hollywood of this century, Hollywood is turning out mature films. Let me give you an example. The Imitation Game. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet.
Oh, yes. We saw. That was fabulous.
Alan Turing has always been a great hero of mine, ever since I discovered his existence. For those who don't know his name, and most people don't, Churchill said he saved, with his invention of the code-breaking Enigma, he perhaps saved 14 million lives in World War II. And without his contribution to the Enigma machine, it is believed the war would have ended perhaps in the winter of 1947 instead of September of 1945. So this is an enormous man in history. In fact, he's considered the father of the modern computer.
Yeah, we loved that. Just loved that very much so. And then the one we loved was the Hawken movie.
Now that's another one.
Fantastic. That actor is amazing.
Strong movies are out today, and that's sort of a heartbreaking. It's a wonderful story, and it's amazing. And this often happens in life. Is why all of these films will suddenly come up at the same season. There'll be a weak season, but this is one of the strongest years, and I think a lot of senior citizens will start wanting to see movies. But there's so many of them now. I drew up a list of 30 that are must-see, and I don't have the list right with me, and I haven't seen them all because they're just, of course, I have other things to do too, and but I'm just going crazy at the number of movies. I would find it very hard to vote for Best Picture if I were in the Academy, and I don't necessarily believe that the answer is opening up the doors. You sort of have to earn your position at the Academy. Now, a lot of people misunderstand something. They think that it's like a vote of everybody. It's not really that way. Directors vote for directors. Actors vote for actors. The theory being that a director would be empowered more to judge the work of a fellow director than, say, someone who's a cameraman or someone who does makeup or wardrobe. And I think that's a valid theory, meaning you're really being honored by your peers. They're truly your peers. So we'll see what happens. Now, to make matters even more horrible, there have been a lot of death threats calling in. There was some horrible person posted, the way ISIS could gain a lot of publicity is to blow up 100 movie stars on Oscar night.
You're kidding.
And so we're having maybe maybe none of these things will happen, but what I'm telling you, it's all in the air. It's being discussed, and I've never really quite seen something like this before. But America does seem to have its cultural battles. Now, Obama was very, very wonderful to the director, the star, and Oprah Winfrey, one of the producers. He screened Selma at the White House and invited them all to a lavish dinner, which was a very nice showcase for them. And there's still a chance it might get Best Picture after all. What often happens sometimes right now in Las Vegas, usually they're never wrong in Las Vegas, they're giving the odds to Birdman. Have you and Bill had a chance to see that?
No, we haven't. Yet? I wanted to see it, but we didn't. It's worth seeing?
Well, yes, in the sense that Michael Keaton, whom I never rushed out to see a Michael Keaton film, although I've seen many, he gives the performance of his lifetime. And once again, he's playing, we're appealing to a senior citizen. He's playing an actor who's trying to make a comeback at his age. And I found it very touching, very moving. He gave us extraordinary performance. And then the second favorite in Las Vegas, don't ask me how I know all this stuff. I have my secrets, you know that, is Boyhood. Now, talk about a director's effort. He followed the life of a boy up until he was 12, meaning it took him 12 years to make this film. And he followed the life of this boy. You know, what he was doing at 5 and what he was doing at 7. I mean, you have to have patience to follow a movie for 12 years. And in some quarters, Boyhood is a favorite. I personally,
excuse me, who was what particular kind of a boy? I mean, who was it?
Well, it was taken from. It wasn't particularly identified as the boy had no special. He wasn't a genius. He was a typical middle class white American boy who grew up in a small middle class town, and it just traced his pain, his anxieties, his failures, his triumphs, his sort of early girlfriend.
Was this a book that turned into a film?
Yes, and it's a favorite because if a director was going to be awarded a prize, they would say, well, this man took on a monumental. Imagine following someone around with a camera for 12 years. I mean, it's just a daunting. But I could go on like you talked about the best of everything. I mean, of Stephen Hawking, that's an incredible story. And then Alan Turing, who is a great tragedy, and Churchill later said, "Well, he won the war for us, even though he's an old sod." Well, that's Churchill's expression for a homosexual, and so Britain. How did Britain award him? As you saw the movie, he was arrested for having sex with a man, and given a choice of 2 years in prison or chemical castration.
I know,
and
he was horrible.
Continuing very important work. We still don't know what work he was trying to do. Maybe he was going to try to invent something else, and he took he put cyanide in an apple and ate the cyanide. And so America. Now, the Queen took her 6 decades, but she pardoned him. I think they should be building statues to him. All of us who didn't want to be slaves to the Nazis owe Alan Turing a great thing. So it's a wonderful time to be a moviegoer if you're a baby boomer, a war boomer, and we haven't figured out what to call people born in the 30s.
It's interesting that I asked Bill, let's go see Selma. It looks really good. He said, look, I feel badly, but I don't want to see any more of that. I don't need any more. I know what happened. And so that's why we haven't seen it.
Yes. Well, anyway, it'll be very, very interesting. And now, are we going to have a break before we continue?
Would you like one?
No, I'm fine.
We're not having a break. We're going to go right ahead with you because I'm sitting with your fantastic new book, Love Triangle. It is amazing.
Well, this there are several developments on the Ronald Reagan. I wrote a book called Love Triangle. Jane Wyman, Nancy Davis, and Ronald Reagan. And I just all I can say it has just gone viral. I'm amazed at the number of websites around the world. It all begins, I think, with as so often happens with me, with the Sunday Times in London and the Daily Mirror, two of the most widely circulated newspapers in the world. And every site seems to pick up from them, and they did huge features with color pictures and everything. Oddly enough, the New York papers don't particularly do that. I'm amazed how people in Britain seem more interested in Golden Age Hollywood stars than people in New York or Los Angeles. It just dumbfounds me. But now, what's been interesting, even before people read the book, it sets off a firestorm. I don't bother. I can't keep up with what people are saying, although some things I found very amusing. One is, because I write about Reagan's private life during his Hollywood years, which has been something relatively suppressed. And people really don't know much about what he was up to. But one person wrote in, well, of course he was a horn dog back in those days because he was a Democrat. Once he became a Republican and adopted family values, Reagan cleaned up his act. And some people are now calling him Randy Ronald. And they're talking about his harem, which is a bit of an exaggeration. And then there are all the conspiracy theories. There's one story that someone wrote, and it's been picked up and published in Singapore and Rio. It said that I am part of a communist conspiracy to debunk American icons, and they would not be at all surprised if I get a monthly check from Putin himself.
Are you kidding? Where was that?
Oh, well, someone wrote it somewhere in. I think someone wrote it in Milano, and then once that story goes out, then what's happened, and you know this, I'm sure very well, is once you get on a major site, there are literally thousands of sites that start picking up and commenting on the story, and the one thing that is sort of frightening is I know how beloved Reagan is, and I know he is viewed as the great icon in many circles today, but the hatred of that man is just, I guess you could say the same thing would be true about Obama today, but all these people posting these vile hate messages, I don't know. It just sort of I'm used to being not necessarily against me, but against Reagan. So he remains a very, very controversial figure in the world, and but it rather scares me to see the vile hatred in the world today. I'm sure it always existed, but I think with the internet now, more and more people have a voice to vent their rage. And some article said that there may be two competing movies about Reagan. One is, oddly enough, a young Reagan, I mean. One, oddly enough, is being made by Disney.
Really?
Yes, and now you know that Disney will not film my book.
Of course not.
But another channel is interested maybe in doing a glamorous movie of Reagan. Whether, so many of these movie ideas are proposed and never follow through on. And to make him to be a devastatingly attractive man. He arrived in Hollywood, and he found the rules were all different. In Des Moines, when he was a sportscaster, he was called the Gay Blade of Des Moines. Gay in those
of course, yeah,
era meant
right, very
a wild man about
right.
town.
Right.
And he called the women up for dates and was extremely popular. But when he got to Hollywood, he found the rules were changed. The young starlets called him. He was the new boy on the town. And as one newspaper pointed out, he had a friend, a singer that he had known in Des Moines, and her name was Joy Hodges. And she really didn't want to go out with him, so she arranged a date for him. She said, this woman will be calling you. I just did a movie with her. She's a young starlet trying to become a movie star. And he got a call and said, Ronald Reagan, hello, this is Betty Grable.
No way.
And he had never heard of Betty Grable. And, of course, she was on the dawn of world fame, became the greatest pinup girl of World War II, and also the biggest box office attraction in the world. So, but he knew her. She was his introduction to the beautiful women of Hollywood. And the only thing Reagan ever really admitted, he did admit that I loved his phrase, I'd never heard it before, that I developed a disease called leading lady-itis. And he defined that as you fall in love with the girl you're appearing with in the movie, and then at the end of the movie, both of you go on your separate ways. And of course, the most famous recent example of that was Brad Pitt was married to Jennifer Aniston, but he made a movie with Angelina Jolie, and so Jennifer Aniston went on her way, and Angelina Jolie moved in with Brad Pitt. So, I mean, leading lady-itis has certainly been known to happen, but Reagan said he came down with a real case of it. Now, one thing that I'm finding in all these stories going around the world is it seems that everyone thinks of Reagan as, indeed they would, as an older, talk about, he wasn't a baby boomer. He was born in 1911. But he was one, he became our oldest president serving in office. And so that's the world image of him. And what I have set out to do, and it only took me decades over the years, is just accumulate all the women he dated and sometimes fell in love with. It was just more than Jane Wyman. Now, he and Jane Wyman were not maybe the most compatible. He finally found what he was looking for in Nancy, but that took him until 1952. And one of the most interesting stories that I found about Reagan, it was what would be called a Hollywood rondelay. Jane Wyman divorced him in 1948 because she had fallen in love with Lou Ayres. Lou Ayres had been the husband of Ginger Rogers, and he was her co-star in Johnny Belinda, which I'm sure you saw that years ago.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And where she played a deaf mute, and she won an Oscar. And Lou Ayres had promised to marry her, so she divorced Reagan. But what a lot of people don't know is that Reagan then started dating other women, and he fell in love with Adele Jurgens. Now, a lot of people today don't remember who she was. She was a beautiful blonde bombshell of the 40s. Lovely. And she was making a movie called Ladies of the Chorus, and it was the first star role for a young actress named Marilyn Monroe. And Reagan gave Adele, and I got to meet her several times. She told me he gave her a mink coat and a diamond bracelet and proposed marriage to her. After all, he was making $3,500 a week, which, by the way, in 1948 was a lot of money. Many people would like to be making that now. And so he would go and pick up Adele. Well, guess who he met? He met Miss Marilyn Monroe. And now, my belief is that she was more interested in the fact that Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild than she was attracted to Reagan. If it turned out she was in love with someone else. But behind Adele's back, Marilyn arrived one night at Reagan's bachelor flat, and they developed a romance on the side, which continued. He was laid up in bed he injured his leg and broke 3 bones in a charity baseball game. And so Marilyn began to visit Reagan beginning when he was in his hospital bed. And then when Adele found out about it, she broke off with Reagan, but she told me she kept the mink coat and the diamond bracelet, and why not?
You know, Darwin, I know that I just don't want to run out of time, but I must tell you something that I really enjoyed the very last chapter. It says where it was a special feature, White House Nights. No, not that one. Ronald Reagan and the long goodbye. That was the one. That was really beautifully done. I mean, you did have some insight. You did tell what it's like to have Alzheimer's and how it was for him. I felt that was a very nice
Well, I
chapter.
wanted to put that in because
you did.
There's another Reagan book, which is The Road to the White House, and his long involvement. But I wanted to put that in, although basically my book ends when he settles down into a marriage with Nancy.
I know, but I wanted you to know that.
I wanted to show you, though, how complicated to prove a rondelay. Okay, so Marilyn and Ronnie are having a thing. And Marilyn then is living with band leader Fred Codger, who had been married before. And he had a 13-year-old daughter. And poor Marilyn didn't have any money, so Fred moved her in. Fred had just been dumped by Judy Garland. And so Marilyn fell madly in love with Fred. But it seems that Fred was dating the recently divorced woman named Jane Wyman. This is where it gets really complicated. And so Fred was having an affair with Marilyn Monroe and Jane Wyman, and he finally decided that Marilyn wanted to marry him, but he said, "You're a very stupid, ignorant woman. You're very vulgar, and you're stupid, really stupid, and you are not, and you're a bit whorish, and I want a very decent, classy woman for my wife and for the mother of my child, and I'm going to marry Jane Wyman." And lo and behold, and with Reagan's approval, he thought Fred Codger would be a very nice husband. She only got really angry at Ronald, Jane Wyman, when he announced he was going to marry Nancy Davis. She said, "I want to get married before you do, so I won't look like the jilted woman." So they were sort of a jockeying as to who would get married first in 1952. And finally, both of them got married around the same time. And things went fine with Fred Codger, but then problems developed. Jane Wyman made one of her most famous movies called Magnificent Obsession with Rock Hudson. And she developed this powerful crush on Rock Hudson. she didn't know that he was gay at the time because that was not well known in 1954. And, of course, it was a hopeless romance. Then Rock Hudson met Fred Codger and fell in love with Fred Codger. So he took Fred from Jane, and then Jane eventually divorced him. And lo and behold, unbelievably, 2 or 3 years later, Rock Hudson dumped Fred, and he came back to Jane Wyman. And she took him back, and guess what? She remarried him again. And the marriage didn't last, and he took off with this saxophone player in his band, and they eventually got a divorce, and she never remarried again, although entered her, what we now call her cougar period. I guess, do people know what that means?
Yes, I think a lot of us know what the cougar, but before you do it, I had a question. Isn't Reagan, though, he's the only movie star who became a president, right? Or did I miss one?
Oh no, he was the only movie star who ever became president.
Right.
And also, he was the only divorced man who ever became president.
Oh, I didn't even remember that.
Yes, no, in fact, up until Reagan came along, it was considered that if you were divorced, you couldn't be president. That just wasn't allowed. So he changed that, and he was greatly influenced to go into politics by his friend George Murphy, who was a famous song and dance man in movies of long ago, and he eventually settled in Florida. He ran for the Senate and won from California. So in many ways, long before Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Murphy paved the way for. Now Murphy made a movie with Nancy Davis called Donovan's Brain, and he was, forgive me, Nancy, if you're listening this morning, he was not impressed with her, and he urged Reagan to marry his current girlfriend, which after Monroe drifted away, he took up with Doris Day, who was an emerging, and of course they appeared in a movie called Storm Warning with Ginger Rogers about the KKK. And that's where I came into the picture, because that's the first time I met Reagan. They decided to open the film in Miami because it was about the KKK, and they wanted it to be in a southern city. But they figured Birmingham, Atlanta, those things were maybe a little bit too dangerous to open a movie about the KKK, and they decided on Miami because they felt it was a very diversified city. It wasn't just a southern city, because it had Jewish people from New York and all sorts of people. Well, you know Miami. I grew up there.
Of course.
And so they opened Storm Warning in Miami, and a romance developed between Doris Day. And bless her, she's still alive. She's still looking after her animals in Carmel. And I don't know what she feels about me, because her picture is being plastered on all the supermarket tabloids about her affair with Ronald Reagan. Maybe I'll get a call from her.
Oh, yeah, hope. Yeah, hope. Well, I have to say, though, after reading this book, the amount of work that you put into these books, and the amount of people who, some we've heard of, at least I haven't, but many, I'm always just flabbergasted by you and how you remember and how you do this. And it's so well written, too. How can you just go on and on and on and make every page more exciting than the other, Darwin? I don't know how you do it.
Well, thank you very much. But, a lot of you mentioned something once, that many of Reagan's girlfriends are unknown, and that's true, but several people, though, have called, and they said, who were really the famous women that he was involved with? he was involved with many starlets because.
Well, they have to read your book, and they can find out.
Yeah, as the president of Screen Actors Guild, many actresses thought that he could advance their career, but then he had to tangle with a fiery. Jane Wyman had to face off against a fiery redhead from Brooklyn who came to Hollywood to play Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind and lost the role, and that was Susan Hayward. Susan Hayward appeared in a movie with Reagan called Girls on Probation, and she really fell for him. And then Jane Wyman made a movie called Brother Rat with him, and she also fell for him. So this poor man, in addition to all the other phone calls he was getting, he had two very strong women. Susan Hayward, you may know this, once lived in Fort Lauderdale, and I was with the Broward Bureau of the Miami Herald, and that's where I got to know her because her secretary, a male, Peter Pell, was one of my best friends, so he often included me in Susan Hayward. And so all the material I have on Susan Hayward directly came from the woman herself. And she admitted, she said, I did fall in love with him, and to put it bluntly, he dumped me. So she said, it was Ronald Reagan who gave me my theory about what we should do with men. And I said, what theory is that, Miss Hayward? And she says, I think we should take all men and fry them in deep fat. I'm sure you, but now many people listening to us will remember Ann Sheridan.
Yep.
The Oomph Girl, they called her. And she appeared with Reagan in his most famous movie called King's Row, and they began an affair. And that's the one where a sadistic doctor amputated his legs, and he woke up and said, "Where's the rest of me?"
Yep. And
that became the title of his first autobiography. Now, in that autobiography, that's horrible, his autobiography. He didn't tell you anything, and now he lived 8 years with Jane Wyman, and he mentions her only one time, and he says, at this SAG meeting was attended by William Holden, Charles Coburn, and then he named 5 other people, and he says, and Jane Wyman. And that was the mother of his children. You know, they had a daughter, Maureen Reagan. Many people remember her, and she died. She had breast cancer. And Michael Reagan is an adopted son, and he's a right-wing radio commentator today. And right near the end of their marriage, they gave birth to a little girl, and Christina, and she lived only a few hours and died, which was, I don't know, it seemed to be like the final straw in the Wyman-Reagan marriage for many reasons. And but he also dated Patricia Neal, who was a wonderful actress, and became very involved with her. And so he didn't just date minor stars. He some of the major stars became very involved with him.
Before we really run out of time, there was a thing in your book. I just have to read this. It's so it says Nancy gets a reputation as one of those girls whose phone number gets handed around a lot, but it's at Manhattan Store Club, Clark Gable was seen dating Nancy Davis. A columnist wrote, has something happened to Clark Gable, something in the form of starlet Nancy Davis, that is changing the fitful pattern of his romantic life? Has he, in other words, finally found the Gable woman for whom he is more than willing to give up the Gable women? The answer seems to be yes, even though if it is love at all, so far it's love in hiding. But then let me finish. Ronald Reagan may have been Nancy's consolation prize after losing Clark Gable, but the B-picture star became the love of her life. She made up her mind long before he did. The problem was how to get this roving post-Wyman Romeo to quit dating every starlet in Hollywood and settle down to home and hearth with her.
Well, that is absolutely true. I mean, Spencer Tracy, Nancy Davis, like many women at that time, had a crush on Clark Gable. He still had that Rhett Butler Gone with the Wind image, and he was called the King. And Spencer Tracy was one of Nancy's best friends and also best friend of Gable. So he found out Nancy had a crush, and he actually set up a blind date with Gable and Nancy. And she said at the time, what, the king of Hollywood is going to climb up 4 flights of stairs in New York to date a starlet? But they hit it off. They hit it off immediately. And then Nancy said later, she said, I think I flubbed it because one night he was sort of awkwardly proposing to me, and he said, Nancy, how would you feel to go live on a ranch? Now, he was referring to the ranch he owned in Encino, California. And she said, I should have said, yes, it's my dream. I've always wanted to live on a ranch. She ultimately ended on Reagan's ranch, but she said, I said something really stupid. I said, oh, I don't know. I've never thought about it. And she said, Gable never pursued it after that. So that was Nancy's fantasy. In fact, some of the girls, when she was going to college, she told a story that many of them, back in those days, and maybe still today, but women had favorite actors that they would have crushes on, and they would get pictures of them. And she said some of the girls in her dorm had pictures of Ronald Reagan, and she said, I looked at him and I said, are you turned on by Ronald Reagan? He does nothing for me.
Oh, it's interesting that he didn't really do anything for me either. I mean, even besides just being the president, but I meant his attractiveness was not my style for some reason. I don't know why, but
yeah. I mean, of course, it's all a matter of taste.
Yeah.
But he did, and the record is in. He did attract many, many women, and in a way, I think my book wants to bring a new chapter to his life.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people.
And we have no more time. We're running out of time. This has been fantastic. I know we could go. You and I could go on and on and on. But Darwin Porter, be sure to get the book Love Triangle, Ronald Reagan, Jane Wyman, and Nancy Davis. It is a huge book. It's about 700, almost 700 pages, and it is.
Yeah, but there are 250 pictures in it.
Oh yeah, I know it. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Darwin,
pictures
so
you
much.
Probably never have seen.
That's
before.
right. You never will again either.
Now,
Thank you.
You have a great show coming
yes,
up.
Darwin.
And,
thank you.
And I'm glad you're down there in that beautiful Florida weather
Right.
and not having to endure these.
So
North
come
Greenland
visit.
conditions.
So come visit. You never come out of your house. But we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much, Darwin.
Bless you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye. We'll be back right after the news.